Hi everyone, we made it. Song 9, Ode to a Joy. Here we go. The final piece in Recorder Karate 1. So I want you to look, as I always tell you, you want to look at the bottom of the page first. And there's a picture of Beethoven, who lived from 1770 to 1827. There's a lot of misconceptions about Beethoven. A lot of people think he was deaf his whole life, and that's not true. He started going deaf about the time he was 30. And by the end of his life, he was completely deaf, and he still did compose music. So what he did, he was innovative. He cut off the legs of his piano and put it on the ground so that he could feel the vibrations from the piano, and he knew what he was playing. And so all of you have actually experienced a little bit of that. You've experienced the vibrations if you have the bass up high on a stereo in the car maybe, or you go to a concert and it's really loud. But as far as hearing the music in your head, I would guess that all of you at some point in your lives have had a song stuck in your head. So there we go. By the time Beethoven wrote this, Ode to Joy, this is from his 9th symphony, and he only wrote 9 symphonies, so this was his very last one. He was completely deaf. He could not hear a thing, nothing at all. And yet it's one of his most famous, this one and the 5th, which is the da-da-da-da one. So those are, if you know something by Beethoven, it's probably one of those too. So Ode to Joy from the 9th Symphony. The 9th Symphony was the first symphony to use voices. Symphonies are usually just written for orchestras. So it is a piece that has multiple movements. So those are different parts, different little songs within the piece, and they're usually contrasting. Like you might have a fast one and then a slow one and then another fast one, stuff like that. So Beethoven actually used voices in his symphony, and this was completely new. Nobody had done this before. So he was definitely an innovator. He brought us from the classical period in music to the romantic period. He really ushered that in. So he's certainly one of the best known composers. At the end of the 9th Symphony, Beethoven kept conducting after the music was over because, again, he couldn't hear. And the applause was so thunderous and the standing ovation so great, but he didn't hear any of it. So the person who was the concertmaster is the first violinist. The violinist who's the very best in the whole orchestra actually had to tap him on the shoulder and turn him around so that he could see all these people who just loved his music so much. So it's certainly a very meaningful piece. It's a beautiful piece. Originally the words were in German, but we adapted them to English. Not me, happened a long time ago, but so it's a pretty common. We sing it in church sometimes, and it is part of our Arts Night program. So basically, there's the picture of Beethoven, which means you have nothing new to learn, but you just learned something about Beethoven, so there we go. So there's nothing new in this song. There are no new concepts. You've learned all of them. Couple of things to watch out for, though. The first line and the second line look very much alike, but the last measures are different. And that has largely to do with what's happening in the other instruments. Okay, so there's something called a half cadence happening here and an authentic cadence happening here. Don't worry about that too much, but that's why those notes are different, and they're pretty much the same otherwise. The last line is very similar to the second line, okay, the one that ends on G there. The only difference is that at the end of the third line, you have this B, and it comes a beat earlier than we imagine it. It usually comes on beat 1. Here it's coming on beat 4 of the previous measure, and it's tied in, so that's a 2-count note. I find that students on this song tend to struggle most on the third line because it's the different one. Again, 1, 2, and 4, very similar. 3 is different. It's our contrasting section of this little piece. So once again, you want to make sure that you're taking extra time to make sure you can speak your notes in rhythm, that you can do the fingerings in rhythm. When you play this, it's very likely that the first time, even if you've gone through the notes out of rhythm, in rhythm, done the fingerings, that you're still going to struggle a little the first time, and that's okay. So it's really important. You might need to isolate that third line. And I talked about that previous song a while back. that, if you're struggling with the whole piece, you need to slow the whole thing down. Use a metronome, get a metronome app. It's a little timekeeper thing, keeps the beat for you. Slow it down and then speed it up gradually. But you might also just need to isolate this line. And that means instead of practicing the whole song, just practice that line. Because we don't want to practice long, we want to practice smart. It's not that I don't want you to practice at least 45 minutes a week now that we're out of school. We up that just a little because we're not having music class. But we want to make sure that you're practicing smart so that you can get the most accomplished in that time. And if you spend, if you go through the song 16 times and you're still playing that third line wrong, you've accomplished nothing. But if you take those 4 measures, 2, 3, 4, and play them a few times, you'll probably be able to put it back into the song and play it correctly. And then instead of spending 20 minutes on it, maybe you spend 5. So that's there. We're practicing smart. We're working on what we need to and not working on what we don't need to work on. So once again, the other thing that's tricky in this third line is watching for those eighth notes. So we've got quarter, 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 eighth, quarter, quarter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the tie there. So making sure that you can do that. And it's going to take just a little bit of extra time likely. I'm going to play this for you. It sounds like this. Just one thing I forgot to mention. In this song, you are using your left hand for all but one note. There is a D at the end of the third line. You want to make sure that your right hand is always ready, even when you're not using it, so that you're prepared to do that. That is one thing that really tends to trip people up in general. So going the G, A, D. Make sure that your fingers are ready to do that. All right. Congratulations on making it to this point. I'm very proud of you. And hopefully I'll get to hear you pass the book really soon on Zoom. Take care, everyone.